Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome to another episode of In the Word. I pray that this episode finds you in good health. I know that we still have a lot going on when it comes to dealing with this pandemic, this virus. So I pray that you guys are healthy on today, and not only healthy in your physical man, but I pray that you are also healthy in your spiritual man. And what do I mean by that? I pray that you guys are still keeping the faith. I pray that you guys still know that God is in charge in spite of what's being said, in spite of what you're seeing, in spite of, some of the people that we have had pass away. I just pray that you guys are still standing strong in your faith and that you are continually feeding your spirit man through prayer and through the word. And with that being said, I wanted to just share a couple scriptures with you guys briefly to prayerfully encourage you guys in the midst of all that we still have going on in this world. And I wanted to come out of the book of Daniel, and I'm going to be coming out of Daniel chapter 3. And this story may be a familiar story to many of you, dealing with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And if you don't know, about this story, just to give you a little background, there was a king by the name of Nebuchadnezzar, and he had set up this golden image. And he said that, listen, whoever does not bow down to this golden image, when they hear the different types of instruments being played, when they hear the music go forth, he says, whoever does not bow down to this image that I have set up, I will throw them in the fiery furnace. And the Bible says that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they had refused to bow down to this image that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. And I want to take it from Daniel chapter 3, starting in that 15th verse. And now this is Nebuchadnezzar addressing the three Hebrew boys about their stance and what it is that they were doing at the time. So we're going to start in that 15th verse. And it says, and this is Nebuchadnezzar talking, he says, now if ye be ready, that at what time ye hear the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, and dulcimer, and all kinds of music, ye fall down and worship the image which I have made. Well, but if ye worship not, ye shall be cast the same hour into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. And who is that God that shall deliver you out of my hands? So he asked him a question that listen, if you don't do this, who is going to be the God? What God is going to deliver you out of my hands? Verse 16, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we are not careful to answer thee in this matter. So they said, listen, we're not going to hold our tongue when it comes to this thing. As a matter of fact, we're going to be very blunt with you with what we have to say. Verse 17 goes on to say, they said, if it be so, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of thine hand, O king. Verse 18, but if not, be it known unto thee, O king, that we will not serve thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up. And the three key words that I want to touch on, and that's going to shape the topic of my message, is dealing with those three first words in that 18th verse. They said, but if not. And I wanted to talk to you guys about accepting God's will. In other words, when we are in situations like we are in the midst of this pandemic, this virus, when we are looking for God to deliver us, when we are looking for God to deliver loved ones, are we able to first know that God is able to do it? And if he wants to do it, he can do it. But if he does not do it, we are still not going to turn our back on God. We are still not going to lose our faith in God. We are still not going to bow down to any of Satan's images. And I wanted to talk to you guys about that because, with everything that we're seeing a lot of people get sick. We're seeing many loved ones pass away. And I just wanted to encourage you guys that, listen, sometimes things don't go the way that we would like them to go. Does that mean that God is not still in control? Does that mean that God's will is not still going forth? Of course not. But sometimes these are the things that have to happen. This is a part of God's will, because if it wasn't a part of God's will, these individuals, our loved ones, they would not have passed away. Some of us that may have gotten sick, we would not have gotten sick. But what we have to remember is that God has a plan here, that there's a plan that has been laid out, and God is going to follow it to a T all the way into the end. And I wanted to encourage you guys, don't allow Satan to speak to your mind. Don't allow Satan to make you think that God has forsaken you, that he has turned his back on you because of what you're going through in this pandemic, whether it's financially, whether it's physically, like I said, whether it's the love of a lost one. Know, just like you knew before all this happened, just like you said you knew before any of this happened, that God is still in control. And that is something that we cannot forget. The same way we felt 3 months ago, 4 months ago, before we saw any of this coming, that's the same way we should feel now, that in spite of how this situation has played out, in spite of how many people have gotten sick, in spite of how many people have passed away, that God still has this thing under control. And the thing that we have to learn about being a Christ follower, being a child of the King, is that we accept whatever it is that the King is doing. We accept whatever it is that the King is allowing. And that's what Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were saying. They were saying, listen, if things don't go the way that we desire them to go, if you grab us and start to throw us in the fiery furnace, even if we not sure if God is going to deliver us or not, we are not bowing down to that image. So in other words, what they are saying is we are not turning our back on God. We are not giving up our faith in God, because once we give that up, what else do we have in a fallen world? And I wanted to encourage you guys, if you need to pray more, pray more. If you need to get in the word more, get in the word. We're all praying one for another, that we all maintain our faith in the midst of everything that it is we see going on. But understand, this is not something that is foreign. There's many people in the Bible that wanted God to do things and pray for God to do things, that God did not work them out in that particular manner. When we think about Paul, remember Paul talked about how he had a messenger from Satan to buffet him, and that word buffet, it's talking about to contend against or to battle against. So it was opposition to him. So in his mind, he's thinking, listen, God, you have called me to do this work, so surely when I pray to you, and the Bible said he ended up praying 3 times. In his mind, I'm sure he's like, of course God is going to take this away, because I'm doing the work of God. But guess what God tells him? First of all, God doesn't take it away, but God tells him, my grace is sufficient for thee. In other words, he says, my grace is enough. That's what sufficient means. It's enough. It's able. He says, listen, it's able to see you through the rest of the way. But this particular thing that you're praying that I take away from you, this pain, whatever it is you're going through, he says, listen, you're going to have to hold on to that until you leave this place. But guess what? If you hold on to me, if you continue to keep your faith in me, my grace will get you through it. And that's what I'm here to encourage you guys. Do not lose your faith in God. Keep on holding on to God. Whatever it is you have experienced in this pandemic, God's grace will get you through. And I wanted to encourage you guys in that, because it is not always easy to accept God's will. But once we get to a place where we're like Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, when he said, listen, please, if it's possible, take this cup of suffering away from me. But he goes on to say something very key, and I've talked about this in the past. He says, nevertheless, which means in spite of, however. But what is he saying? In spite of how I feel, in spite of me not wanting to drink this cup, Not my will be done, but thy will. And that's the thing we have to possess in this season, in this hour, a nevertheless. No matter what I see with my eyes, no matter how I feel, in my emotions and in my mind, I know that God still has this thing under control, and I am standing with God. I am standing on his word, and I am trusting his will. So guys, know that I love you. I pray that this encouraged you. Listen, let's continue to pray one for another because we need it. But hey, listen, I'm not going to doubt him. He's always come through for me, in spite of if he did what I wanted him to do or what I was praying for him to do, or if he didn't, it still always worked out. Just like Romans 8:28 says, it still always worked out for my good. So know that it's going to work out for your good. It may hurt for a while, but God's grace will bring you through. Guys, I love you. Until the next time we get together, shalom.